In this video, we're going to be looking at what it takes for a couple to retire in Canada with $10,000 a month after tax, money to burn. My name is Reese. I'm a chartered investment manager, a fellow of the Canadian Securities Institute, a financial planner, and the founder of Well Built Wealth. And today I'm going to walk you through a number of different scenarios to help you get a really solid overview of what this could look like. And I'm going to do this using the best financial planning software in the business, Conquest. But before we get into it, I want to point out two things. First, what you're going to witness today is a high-level overview of these cases. I am going to try out some different strategies and tweak some things just to show you what it looks like, but I am in no way deep diving. Nor am I going to spend the time finessing or optimizing any of these scenarios because that would take way too long and you'd get bored. Now, obviously, if these were real cases, we would spend the time and we would dive deep, but they're not, so we won't. Secondly, the angle that I'm shooting this video from today is very intentional. See, the other day, a bird flew by and somehow managed to angle a little gift for me on one of my giant windows. And so now I have a giant bird turd not only affecting my view all day, every day, but also limiting where we can shoot these videos without featuring an uninvited piece of modern art. Now, I have been informed that we're on a 6-month rotating window cleaning schedule here, but nobody really knows when they were here last, so this could be a thing for a while. Awesome. Anyway, back to it. Here are the three main scenarios we're going to be covering today. Number 1, investments only. In this scenario, our subjects, whose names are going to rhyme, of course, have no guaranteed pension income aside from Canada Pension Plan and old age security. So basically, this means that their retirement income is pretty much going to have to be funded from their own investments, which obviously means they're going to need to have a sizable investment portfolio. Number 2, pensions only. This scenario is basically the opposite of the last one. In this scenario, they have some very delicious defined benefit pension income, but no real investment portfolio to speak of. Number 3, a blend plus a downsize. Yep, this one is exactly what it sounds like, a blend of the last two scenarios, but then we're also going to throw in a downsizing of the family home just to put a cherry on top. Okay, now as usual, before we jump in, we have to nail down our baseline assumptions. And to keep things simple, in all our scenarios, we're going to use the same ones. Everyone in this video just turned 65 at the beginning of the year, which was actually just a couple of weeks ago. And as a birthday present to themselves, they all retired on that exact same day. They all live in Punky Doodles Corners, Ontario. Yes, that's an actual town, which, go figure, is quite well known for its strange name and frequent sign theft. For life expectancy, we're going to plan to age 89. I'm choosing 89 because some people get mad in the comments sections of some of my videos when I use age 90, so I'm reducing it by 1 year just to be cheeky. Inflation will peg at 3% over the long run, because again, we got to pick something and it's got to be reasonable over a long period of time. For the investments, we're going to use a balanced portfolio across the board and assume a rate of return of just over 5%. As for Canada Pension Plan, we're going to have each person tracking to get 75% of the maximum amount possible at age 65. We're doing that because not everybody has maxed out their CPP contributions all along the way, so most people actually end up with less than the maximum possible amount. For old age security, we're going to assume that everyone has been in Canada their whole lives, and so they'll all be entitled to the full benefit when they hit age 65. Also, in each scenario, there is a family home that is paid for and it's worth $1 million. But we're going to leave the family home out of all of the scenarios except the final one where we include a downsizing. And we're doing that so that people who don't own a home or those who maybe plan on passing it down to the next generation can see what all of this looks like without having to rely on that asset. And to further keep things simple, they are all sliding into retirement with no debt. Last, but definitely not least, we're going to build in a go-go, slow-go, and no-go phase of retirement income as well to show what it looks like if they spend less as they age. Now, our default is going to be $10,000 a month all the way through retirement, but I want to show you both in each scenario so that you can see the impact of using that strategy. And when we do show the phases, we're going to use the following metrics. The go-go phase from age 65 to 75 will be $10,000 a month. The slow-go phase from 75 to 85 will be $8,000 a month. And in the no-go phase from age 85 on, it'll be $7,000 a month. And there you have it. The table is set. So let's get to it. Scenario 1, investment heavy. Meet Greg and Peg Schmeg. They've been working hard, behaving themselves, and stacking their chips for decades. And it's paid off. They now have $1,760,000 set aside between their RRSPs, TFSAs, and a joint non-registered account. Well done, Greg and Peg. And as we can see here, without doing any intelligent planning whatsoever, they are 97% on track of meeting their retirement income goal, which simply means that without selling their home, they have enough sources of retirement income to cover 97% of their goal of having $10,000 each month after tax until age 89. But to be clear, this $10,000 per month goal is in today's dollars. And this is why you see the bars getting slightly taller each year as you move along the bar graph. They are increasing by 3% each year to keep up with inflation. So in the first year of retirement, they need $10,000 per month after tax. But in the second year, they will need 3% more. They will need $10,300 per month after tax, and so on. The implications of long-term inflation are actually really hardcore. If you look at the total amount Greg and Peg need in 2026, you can see that it's somewhere around $132,000 before tax. And actually, if I flip over to the cash flow summary, we can see the exact amount, $132,619. But if you look at the long run, you can see how gross this gets. After 20 years of relentless compounding 3% inflation, that same amount is going to cost them roughly $250,000 in 2046. Anyway, the moral of the story is inflation is disgusting, but we've accounted for it. Now, before we move on, I'll just point out a couple of the other things you are looking at here to make sure you understand the landscape. Each one of these columns, which represent the desired income in each year, are made up of different colors. And these colors are simply showing us where the income is coming from. And you can see the income legend up here. But for example, we can see that in 2026, the retirement income is currently made up of CPP, OAS, minimum withdrawals from the RRSP accounts, which have been turned into RIFs now, and some withdrawals from TFSAs. I'm definitely not suggesting that that's the ideal mix. It's not, but that's how it is at the moment. Now up here, you can see the legacy wheel. And this is simply giving us a tally of what the expected estate value will be at death after the necessary taxes are paid. Now you may be wondering, how can the estate be worth $1.96 million at death if they are running out of money in the last year of their retirement? Well, in this case, it's simply the value of their home. You can see this really clearly in this net worth chart. Here you can see the value of their home growing over time while their investment accounts are being wound down until all they have left in terms of assets is the home. Anyway, as you can see, their nearly $1.8 million in investments is pretty much enough to do the trick. But with just a couple of minor tweaks, we can make it work even better. If we delay their CPP from age 65 to age 70, which will get each of them a 42% permanent increase in their CPP benefit, we can see that it bumps them to 99% on track. Now, we're not going to spend any time going into the pros and cons of delaying CPP in this video because I have other videos that cover that in serious detail. I'm just showing you the options. Another thing we need to look at is optimizing the withdrawal strategy to make sure that Greg and Peg are pulling out the right amounts from the right accounts in the most long-term, tax-smart way possible. And look at that. We've jumped up another 3% to 102% on track just by changing where we withdraw from and when we do it. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other things Greg and Peg could look at doing to improve this situation. But one of the biggest game changers is to implement the go-go, slow-go, no-go strategy. See, if we drop their income from $10,000 a month to $8,000 a month at age 75, when they're probably going to spend less anyway, and then do that again to $7,000 a month at age 85, we get a whole new ball game. They've gone from 102% on track to 125%. And it jacked up their estate value big time as well. So now they have some buffer, lots of it. And that's great for Greg and Peg. But you might be looking at this and thinking, well, all that's saying to me is that I don't actually need 1.76 million to make this happen. I could do it for less. So what size of a portfolio do I need to make this happen if we're going to run with all of these tweaks? Well, let's look. And I'll spare you having to watch me play with the numbers and simply tell you that a portfolio of 1,450,000 gets us right back to 101%. So using the assumptions we're working with, implementing this particular go-go, slow-go, no-go strategy means that you could retire with roughly $300,000 less, which is a pretty significant chunk. Now, another thing you might be thinking is that this rate of return that I've been using of 5.22% is for the birds, like my window. Maybe you expect a rate of return that's a little bit juicier than that. So let's do it. Let's look at an average rate of return of 7.2% a year, which is definitely bigger, but without going too optimistic. And let's not even bother delaying CPP to age 70 anymore. And there you are. That's a big deal. Threw you up to 126% on track. Massive jump. Your rate of return is a big stinking deal. And of course, now you're thinking, well, how big does my portfolio need to be if I don't need all of that buffer, if I'm comfortable being closer to that 100% range? Well, again, I'll spare you having to watch me play with the numbers and simply tell you that a portfolio of 1,250,000 lands you at 99%. Now, I should say that this assumes that there's money in TFSAs as well, and not just all in fully taxable RRSP or RIF accounts. Where the money is, which accounts it's in, definitely plays into how much money you'll need, but we don't want to get too far into the weeds. The point is that there are many different ways to get to $10,000 a month, even within this one investment-heavy scenario. Speaking of scenarios, we'd better move on now and jump into scenario number 2, pension heavy. Meet Ran and Jan Chan. They've both worked for a long time in jobs that offer defined benefit pension plans. And basically what that means is that they are promised a certain amount of retirement income from the day they retire to the day they die. Now, in some ways, this scenario is pretty basic. All you have to do is add your CPP, OAS, and defined benefit pensions up, and if they equal $10,000 a month after accounting for taxes, you're good to go. Yep, that's true. If, and it's a big if the pension is indexed to grow with inflation. Now, many pensions are indexed to grow with inflation, especially government pensions, but some aren't. And if it's not indexed, then the benefit amount stays the same and never increases with inflation for the rest of your life. And even when a pension plan does have indexing, it's important to read the fine print, because the plan often has discretion to grant it or not grant it depending on how well the pension fund is doing as a whole. So it's not even necessarily truly guaranteed. And even if the pension is indexed, that doesn't mean that it will increase as much as the cost of living increases. Anyway, what I want you to see here is the massive difference between an indexed pension and a non-indexed pension on a retirement plan. So to start, let's assume that in addition to their CPP and OAS benefits, Ran and Jan each have a defined benefit pension plan of $4,600 a month with 3% a year inflation indexing. As you can see, that gets them super close to the after-tax goal of $10,000 per month. The slight shortfall in the later years is simply due to CPP and OAS being indexed at a bit of a lower rate than 3%. So basically, given the CPP and OAS numbers we've assumed, Ran and Jan need combined defined benefit pensions of just over $9,000 a month if they're inflation protected. And if they are, they don't even need to bother with the go-go, slow-go, and no-go phases, because the money is just going to keep rolling in whether they want it or not. However, if their pensions are not indexed, well, Rand and Jan are going to need some much bigger numbers. Let's see what it looks like if they're not indexed and we beef up their pensions to $5,500 a month each. Well, here we can see that they are good to go for nearly the first decade of their retirement. They'd even have some extra cash in the early years. But then, because the benefit is never increasing with inflation, which you can see really clearly here by how the amount stays flat throughout their whole retirement, they start to fall behind more and more each year until it becomes a pretty serious shortfall. So in this case, Rand and Jan may want to seriously consider implementing the whole go-go, slow-go, no-go thing. And if we implement the same go-go, slow-go, no-go metrics we were looking at earlier, then voila, they're good to go. 99% on track, but with a bunch of buffer in lots of those years, so truly good to go. Okay, now on to our final scenario, the big bad blend. Investments and pensions. Very juicy. Just ask Bert and Gert Schlert. They're loving it. They've got a gorgeous base of guaranteed pension income, plus a solid investment portfolio giving them lots of flexibility. So aside from their entirely ridiculous names, life is quite good in the Schlert hood. Now, Gert has worked for the government for quite a while, and she stacked up a respectable $5,000 a month indexed pension. Bert, on the other hand, has worked in the private sector and built up most of his investment portfolio in RRSPs. And so now they have a total portfolio of $750,000 between his RRSP and their TFSAs. And what do you know? That brings them deliciously close to their goal of $10,000 a month after tax for the rest of their lives. They're 98% on track. Now, as you've seen, there's a lot we can do to optimize their situation and a bunch of variables we could tweak like we did in the first scenario. But to keep this video from getting too aggressively long, I want to focus in on two big movers: implementing the go-go, slow-go, no-go strategy and implementing the downsizing of the family home. So let's start with the income. If we build in the same go-go, slow-go, no-go metrics as before, we can see that they jump from 98% on track to 112% on track. And actually, this is a really sweet spot to be in. I really like this. They get the financial quality of life that they're looking for, but they also get the psychological benefits of having a really healthy buffer. Super solid. And even if we dropped his RRSP account down by 100 grand so that their total portfolio now equaled 650,000 rather than 750,000, it still looks good. They'd still end up with a healthy buffer at 109% on track. As you can see, this phased income throughout retirement can add a lot of flexibility to the plan. And we haven't even looked what it looks like if they were to spend even less in the slow-go and no-go phases. But you want to be careful and not go too crazy with that, because you never know what costs could creep in down the road, such as long-term care or something like that. But the fact is, Bert and Gert own a home that they could sell or downsize if they needed or wanted to. So let's look at that. Let's downsize their home when their slow-go stage starts at age 75 to something that costs 2/3 the price of their current $1 million home, which would be roughly 667 grand. And there you go. Now they're 127% on track, which kind of makes you wonder what the numbers could have looked like if downsizing would have been a key part of their plan all the way along. So let's take a quick look. What if Gert's pension was only $4,000 per month as opposed to $5,000? Well, that dropped him down to 120%, but that's still tons of buffer. So what if their investment portfolio is even smaller too? Well, I just dropped Bert's RSP by another 100 grand, bringing their total investment portfolio down to 550,000, and look, they're still sitting pretty at 116%. And obviously we could keep going here, but I think you get it. There are a lot of ways to get to $10,000 a month, or whatever number it is you have in your mind. It doesn't have to be 10 grand. The point is, if you know what your options are and how to intelligently play with the variables, you might be a whole lot closer than you think.